Hi, welcome to The Point of View. This is your favorite current affairs show on television. Here on The Point of View, we get the right guests, we ask them relevant questions on issues that matter to you. And tonight's show is live, it's interactive. We have one of the best panels I've empaneled for a long time to discuss Africa post-COVID. And when we come back, I'll tell you who they are, but you may want to join the show via your comments. If you're watching on television, please send in your questions and your comments via WhatsApp. The number is on the screen. And if you're watching on any of the social media platforms, we allow for comments so long as they are clean. We'll be right back. Stay with us. So COVID-19 started somewhere late December 2019, became a serious issue in January. But in Ghana, yesterday was exactly 2 months since we experienced our first case, March the 12th. It's been 2 months and a day since COVID-19 became part of our lives. One of the big questions we're asking is what will happen to not just our economy, but the economy of other countries. Tonight we're focused on sub-Saharan Africa. We'll be discussing this from 4 angles. I have the IMF's resident rep in Ghana, whose team have authored a very impressive report on the effects potentially of COVID-19 on Africa. He is in the person of Dr. Touna-Mama. He's joining me, I'm not sure whether from his study or work or home. Doc, good evening. Thanks for joining us. Dr. Albert, good evening.
Good evening, Bernard. Can you hear me?
Loud and clear. It's great to have you. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me on the show.
Great. We're also joined by the CEO of Stanbic Bank Ghana and the president of the Ghana Association of Bankers, Alhassan Andani, in his nice Dagomba Warrior cap. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Bernard. And you have to add chief to that before you get some guys beating you up.
So now Alhassan Andani, forgiveness. Great to have you. Yeah. We also have from the Department of Economics of the University of Ghana, economist Dr. Priscilla Twumasi-Baffour. Doc, good evening. Thanks for joining us.
Good evening, Bernard. Thank you for inviting me.
Great. And last but certainly not least, we have industrialist, lawyer, and economist Oteng Gyasi, who's joining us also from home. Ms. Oteng Gyasi, good evening. Thanks for joining us.
Good evening, Bernard, and I'm glad to be in such a guest company.
Brilliant. So, viewers, we're going to try and answer a few questions. What generally is the prognosis for the African economy post-COVID? And then we'll look at specifically the effect of COVID on 4 things: commodity prices, the job market and employment, on our debt issues, and possibly on other matters. If we have time, we'll also look at solutions. So I have an industrialist, I have 2 economists, and I have a banker. Hopefully we'll learn a thing or 2. So let me start with Dr. Touna-Mama or Albert. So your team authored a quite impressive report, but it looks pretty grim. What are the main highlights of the report concerning sub-Saharan Africa COVID-19? Walk us through the main highlights.
Thank you again, Bernard. I think that the report looks grim because the region, or the world, I should say, is facing an unprecedented health and economic crisis. And for our region, Sub-Saharan African region, the threat here is to reverse the impressive progress that our countries have achieved over the last 30 years in terms of improvement along the medium development goals. And the other challenge, obviously, is that our track can actually be slowed down in terms of continuing to improve. What we do in this report is first to give an estimate or projection of the growth impact of the COVID-19 pandemic as per our estimate. And just like in the rest of the world, what we've seen is that what started as a health crisis, now move into a very severe economic crisis. Can you hear me?
Yes, you are loud and clear. So okay. You're saying that the first impact will be on economic growth. And from the graph I'm seeing, it appears since 1990, this will be the first time that we are actually not growing, but we are contracting. Is that correct?
It's correct. We, as per our projections, we are contracting. We project that the Sub-Saharan African region will contract by about 1.6%, which is the worst projection on record by far. And the challenge here is that this may actually exacerbate social conditions, but also aggravate existing economic vulnerabilities, right? And I think something that is important to spell out here is that unlike the previous crisis where countries will have been affected differently because of the channels, here literally nobody is spared from this economic crisis, and that's important to state that.
What are the main channels through which this problem is manifesting itself? I mean, what is leading to this contraction for the first time in over 2 decades?
I think for our region, we can basically think about 4 ways, this economic crisis will affect our countries. The first one has to do with the containment measures and social distancing. The second one has to do to the collapse of some really key commodity prices. The third one is the very challenging financing conditions, and that is specific to some of the countries that we have in the region. And obviously the last channel, because a lot of emerging, actually advanced or major economies collapse in demand. This will affect not only trade, but also tourism and export for our countries. But let me also highlight that in that fourth channel, when we think about border closures and this type of measures, you also have a serious disruption of supply chains and just trade regionally. So these 4 channels are really standing out. And when you put them together one way or the other, countries in the Sub-Saharan African region will be affected by at least one of these channels.
Okay, so I want my team to put up the first slide again, because I want to just pick comments on that from everybody. The first slide, which shows, yes, everything is blue from 1990 all the way to 2018, 2019, then 2020, boom. There's a red. We are all coming down. Let me start with the economist or economist. Dr. Twumasi-Baffour, how serious is what I'm seeing on the screen, that for the first time in many, many years, we are not even growing by 0%. We are going to contract. How crazy is that?
Indeed, it's unsettling. But when you look at the data, the prediction is quite grim. But what I would say is that the impact is actually will be quite close to the projection over there. But here I need to emphasize that the exact impact on different economies in Sub-Saharan Africa as a whole depends on the way the disease goes in terms of spread and containment and how we manage these. What is quite striking is that it is the first time, we are seeing a pandemic in recent times, and the only major shock we can relate it to would be probably the financial sector crisis in 2008 and probably the oil price shocks in 2014. But even then, you see that when you look at the trajectory of growth in Sub-Saharan Africa, it wasn't that bad. Why? Because now we are faced with 2 major issues, which are health and economic. And the way we can contain this disease is through measures that are quite counterproductive, if you ask. So, for example, social distancing would not work on typical factory floors. Firms that are involved in services, logistics, tourism, all have been adversely affected. And that clearly shows the grim picture we are seeing. But I need to emphasize that the impact overall depends on how individual countries in sub-Saharan Africa respond in terms of the measures that they roll out.
Okay, let me come to Alhassan. Your bank is one of the largest on the continent, and you are a sub-Saharan African bank. If you look at this image, 2020 contraction 1.6, what is that saying to you and your outlook for the next year?
Well, I think the picture couldn't be more grim, because even if you look at the historical trend where we had some semblance of growth, the economic disparities and vulnerabilities across Africa was already very severe. Now throw in contraction. So that's really, a 100-year event that we haven't seen. Now, the biggest movers of the economy in Africa will be our big oil-producing countries and South Africa, Nigeria, Mozambique, Angola, and of course the emerging oil economies like ourselves. So these are taking a direct hit. And also, you track back, South Africa has been having a very sluggish growth over the last 2 years, 3 years, even before COVID. Now COVID comes to throw that whole industrial engine into a tailspin. So the kind of impact couldn't be severer. And I think that red blip, should be a massive wake-up call for all of our countries to see how we address it. As I said, even the growth, even over the several years that we saw some real growth, we had significant disparities, across our countries, which has been laid very bare by the COVID pandemic and what we've seen around our various countries. So the contraction is really, really, for me, about a 100-year event that must wake all of us up to see how do we recalibrate ourselves going forward. So,
guys, put it back up. I want to ask Mr. Oteng Gyasi's view on this, because Mr. Oteng Gyasi, you produce, you have a huge factory, you employ thousands of workers, and you also export. If you look at this thing in front of you, what does this mean for your business?
Concern is our workers, because if you don't have people, you don't have a business. So anything which has the tendency to affect the very lives of our workers is of immediate concern to us. The second thing is that if you have people who don't have demand, for some reason they cannot demand, then immediately it means you don't have a market. So then that will also affect the business, because without demand, without markets, again, you don't have a business. So it's fundamental to the life of every business. And that is why we've seen across the world, global supply chains are affected, and it's the same everywhere. And in our country in particular, and Africa in general, I think that we need, our answer to this pandemic needs to be structured, it needs to be consistent, and also needs to be coordinated, because we are one landmass. And if we don't do it that way, no one country on its own can get away with it.
Let's talk about commodity prices. So I want to put up the commodity slide, and I want Dr. Touna-Mama to walk me through this again. Everything you're putting up is red, and I'm getting very worried. You're saying there's going to be a sharp decline in commodity prices, and it will accentuate the challenges further for many countries. What is going on here, Doc?
Here, what we are seeing is basically the collapse in the price of a few commodities. You have, for the first bar, all the commodities together. You have fuel, you have metals, and you have agricultural raw material. You can see that fuel and gas is by far the biggest collapse. I think around 50% of the reduction in the oil price from what it was at the end of last year. I think today the price is around $30 a barrel. I think for a country like Ghana, the picture is a bit more mitigated by the fact that, you know, the gold price has been quite doing well. So that has somewhat counterbalanced the impact on oil, but not enough, obviously, to you know, have the economy not growing at a rate that is really no comparison to what it has been in the last 10 years or so.
So you're saying that the net effect for all commodities for SSA is still negative, even though gold is going up. If you put everything together, it's still a net negative.
It's still a net negative. And the biggest economies, you know, like Angola, Nigeria, the big oil producers, it's even more striking how big the resource losses they'll face in the short term. But something that I also want to highlight here when we are talking about commodity prices is you obviously have an impact in the short term because, you know, the lower the oil price or the commodity price, the lower the resources for these exporters. But you also have a medium-term impact due to the delay in some projects, right? You have a cutoff price for, you know, oil production and oil exploration to the extent that this price is below their break-even price, then you'll very likely face a delay into you know, oil fields coming on stream. Perhaps the important thing for our countries in the long term is eventually to seize that as an opportunity to diversify their economy away from commodity. So I'll stop here.
Dr. Twumasi-Baffour, what does this say to you? All commodities going down, prices are coming down -18, fuel -38, metals -15, agriculture -7. When you look at this, what does this say to you? Dr. Twumasi, are you there? So please.
Okay, my microphone is
okay,
muted.
so please go ahead. Yes, go ahead.
Okay.
Okay, I'm struggling with Doc. So let me go to Alhassan and I'll come back to Doc when I sort you out. Stanbic, what does this mean? All commodities down, fuel down, metals down, agri down. Alhassan, what does that mean?
That's quite serious for Standard Bank. And as you said, we are a major bank in all of those big commodity trading countries. We're in Nigeria, we're in Angola, we're in Mozambique, we're here in Ghana. You know, so those economies and the oil revenue sort of contributes quite a substantial part of the total national income there, and therefore certainly the kind of overall effect on the economy would mean that we have a very difficult economy to deal with in the next few years. But for us, we're here for the long haul, and I think the point Albert made around, you know, diversifying away from this oil or this commodity economies, it's been virtual. We've always, even before COVID, we saw always the cyclical vulnerabilities of the African economies on commodities. So if we really needed the sort of real attraction to take a hard look at our dependency on the commodities, it is now. And the issue is, what do the other parts of the world demand our commodities to do, and that we cannot do with it? So that's a question to answer. Yeah, but for us, yes, we are exposed to all the producers and also firms in these areas. And we're watching very, very closely and working with them proactively to manage the situation until we can have, you know, national and Africa-wide solutions, and of course some global collaboration to resolve this commodity dependency by sub-Saharan African countries.
Let me come to Mr. Gyasi. Surely this must be good news for you. Fuel prices are coming down, metal prices are coming down. These are inputs into your production process. So as a producer, you must be smiling all the way to the bank, aren't you?
That is, you are only looking at half the cycle. yes, your input prices are down, so it looks good. But then what will happen to your production? Does anybody have money to buy your products? If they don't, then having a cheap product is of no use to you if the demand for your product has collapsed. So really, it's a full cycle which one needs to look at. So generally, I think that collapsed commodity prices in the long term is not good for anybody if it results in a decreased global demand. And that is why we see governments seriously working at stimulus packages, trying to stimulate demand, because it is not enough to have one side of the cycle. You need the second part.
Okay. Dr. Twumasi-Baffour, I have you back. What's your thoughts on collapsing commodity prices for Africa? Hello? So I seem to be struggling with Priscilla. Priscilla, are you there? If you're there, let me just hear your quick comment on this one. Okay, so we'll try and fix the technicalities here. But let me move to the next issue. So there's something called the Purchasing Managers Index for selected countries. And I want viewers to take a closer look at this. So you have, for 4 African countries, something the report calls Purchasing Managers Index, 2017 to 2020. So what does it actually mean? Let me come to Dr. Touna-Mama again, and if my guys can put it up, the economic impact of this. What is the meaning of this Purchasing Managers Index, and what is it showing?
Basically, what it's showing is, your orders and outputs based on a survey of managers in manufacturing and service sector, right? So as you can see from the chart, this is a quarterly chart, right? As you can see, again, just like the chart on GDP growth, you can see for Ghana that the first quarter of this year has seen as well a very sharp contraction of around 35%, which is, you have blue on the first, in the last, the last five years or so. And all of a sudden you have a sharp bar, a sharp red in the first quarter. So this gives you the sense of economic activity in manufacturing and service sector contracting in the first quarter of the year. This is very much the same picture for some of the countries. On this chart, we have Kenya, we have Uganda, and as Alhassan, Mr. Andani just said, you can see that South Africa was already in a difficult situation whereby manufacturing and service sectors were not doing that well. And, despite that, the COVID pandemic has brought even more contraction in those two sectors in the first quarter of the year. So this is a measure of economic activity at the sectoral level.
But for what you have, Uganda and Kenya seem to be doing much, much better before COVID than Ghana. South Africa, I don't know what's happening to them. Can I look at this and say Uganda and Kenyan purchasing power and consumers were faring better than Ghanaians based just on this chart?
You need to look at the scale, right? So let not the viewers be fooled by the impression that the bars are bigger or lower. You cannot directly compare across country. But okay. I think what is important here is just looking at one country, what has been the importance of the collapse compared to the previous measurement in the quarters that have preceded the COVID pandemic.
Okay, Alhassan, your bank's headquarters is South Africa. You are either number 1 or 2. South Africa is number 1 or 2 in terms of size, SSA. Not sure GDP, whether it's Nigeria or South Africa. What does all those red bars mean for your bank continentally?
I think for Standard Bank, we're quite a resilient bank. Even though we're headquartered in South Africa, we span across the 20 and in fact the top 5 economies in Africa. So we're quite diversified. We are also very proud of our traditions in commodity and financing, and we are working very, very closely with the sector players to see how we deal with it. But the charts that were shown basically is usually the telltale signs of an economy going into contraction. So this is about purchasing managers tooling up or getting ready for activity. But you take a view of what is happening with COVID, lockdown, factory shutdowns and stuff like that. Nobody's going to be building inventory for in a kind of production. So that's typically what you see when an economy is about getting into that kind of contraction, which the report very vividly paints. But for us, as I said, as a bank, and I'm sure most of the banks around Africa, the very top 5 banks, strong presence in commodities. We're working very closely with the sector players. I think the big issue for oil and gas is not just COVID. It's all the global, developments in terms of the use of fossil fuels and what will happen to the auto industry, even aviation, and all the big users of oil and gas. Those changes were already in place or coming in and would be even accelerated post-COVID. So we just have to sit back and see how we recalibrate this heavily dependent oil economy and diversify that and make sure that they can.
Okay. Yeah, let me come to Ms. Oteng, Gyasi. What confuses me about this whole conversation is how is it possible for everybody to be losing? Because I thought that economics was a zero-sum game, that if somebody's losing, somebody ought to win. But every part of the world is suffering. Everybody is losing. Production is not going well. Prices are down, yet the producers don't benefit. I mean, how is that possible? I mean, I don't get it.
I'm sure Albert will tell you that there are virtuous cycles and there are also vicious cycles. And when you hit a vicious cycle, you are going in the wrong direction, and everybody will end up losing. So it is not surprising at all, because it's the low prices lead to no demand, lead to no incomes, lead to no jobs, and so you have even lower prices because there is no demand, and you keep going in the wrong direction, and that is why stimulus packages are actually, it took time for the world and for economists to come to this position that you can actually stimulate an economy and stimulate demand. Because, and this came from the lessons from the Great Depression and all those times, So it is not, it's not a zero-sum game in the sense that somebody's gain is always somebody's loss. We can all be losing gradually and going down the wrong path, which is generally what seems to be happening in this case. And so everybody is certain that the thing is to break the chain. And how do you break it? You boost demand.
Let me take Dr. Twumasi-Baffour. I lost you, but I'm told you're back. Just say a quick hello for me to know you're back.
Okay, hello, Bernard. Can you hear me?
Better now. So two points.
Great.
First, we're talking about commodity price falls, and you were making a comment. And now we're also told that demand everywhere is going down, as shown by the chart I put up a few moments ago. What are your general thoughts on those?
So generally, commodity price falls is not surprising because, the disease is contained. So mostly when you look at up north, where you're looking at our destination in terms of exports. Most people, when you look at oil, most people are home under lockdown, so are not running their cars, etc., etc. So it's led to a huge collapse in demand, and that it's the implication we are seeing. And like was indicated earlier, economies are basically demand driven. So once demand is dampened, then it take a rippling effect and then the multiplier effect. And it brings us to the old advice that we keep indicating that Africa needs to be strategic and insulate its economies away from commodities. Because when you look at the data, you can observe that countries that are less commodity dependent are a bit more insulated, or in a way they would adjust to the shocks better than countries. If you look at Africa, you are talking about three of our giant economies. You are looking at Angola, South Africa, Nigeria, which are basically resource dependent. And that makes the outlook quite grim for Africa as a whole, because if your giant players are taking such a huge hit out of this pandemic, then in essence, it affects everybody. But when you look inside Africa, within Africa, you can tell that some economies that are not too resource dependent, you probably will be looking at an economy like Ivory Coast. You can tell that they would cope better. Ghana to some extent, but we are also quite dependent on oil and other commodities. But gold is not doing badly, so we take it in that sense. And overall, when you look at the chart that is there, you are looking at basically the competitiveness of the manufacturing sector and the services sector in all. And you see that it's taken a huge impact on all economies. What is striking is when you look at a giant player like South Africa over there, you see that this economy was struggling for the past 2 years, and the pandemic couldn't have come at a worse time for our giant player, which is South Africa. And Nigeria, indeed, is also struggling with this because they were having issues before the pandemic.
Okay, this is the point of view. My guests are Dr. Priscilla Twumasi-Baffour, Department of Economics, University of Ghana. Alhassan Andani is the MD of Stanbic Bank, President of Ghana Association of Bankers. Oteng Gyasi is a lawyer, economist, and industrialist. And Dr. Albert Touna-Mama, country rep, IMF Ghana. So the questions we have when we come back, we'll look at unemployment and debt, but also how much stimulus package is required and where should we pump those monies to kickstart the revival. We'll also read your questions. Stay with us. Welcome back to The Point of View. Today we have an economic panel. My guest, Dr. Albert Touna-Mama, country rep, IMF in Ghana. Dr. Priscilla Twumasi-Baffour, Department of Economics, University of Ghana. Mr. Oteng Gyasi, lawyer, economist, and of course, industrialist. And Alhassan Andani, MD, Stanbic Bank, Ghana, President, Ghana Association of Bankers. Here are some of your comments. Nobody can escape the direct or the dire effects of COVID-19. Countries that understood this early and invested big to contain and halt it in time will be able to recover early and take advantage to win in the end. The way Ghana is going about it, it may drag a bit longer. This is from Bright. Bernard, I am Sam from Spintex Road. Ghana must do more to confront COVID-19 head on by sending trained and empowered volunteers to targeted communities to see to the compliance of all the protocols until it becomes a way of life for people. Good evening, Bernard. Good job. I believe we shouldn't be importing things like tea-roll, matchsticks and toothpicks, among others. We need to strengthen our local production and cut our foreign demand. Ernest from Old Estate, Kofredia. Okay, maybe let me pick on this to ask a quick question. A lot of people have been saying, and maybe I'll start with Albert, a lot of people have been saying in Ghana that COVID has shown us that we need to learn how to depend on ourselves. We need to produce our own medicine, produce our own food, because Vietnam is not exporting rice, India was not exporting medicine, and therefore countries should look inward. Is that the way to go, or will that become counterproductive? Because everybody seems to think countries that were import dependent have been shown their smoothness level, and therefore we should never allow ourselves to depend on anybody again. What do you say, Albert?
My sense is that it's not so much about moving towards protectionism. I think what this crisis has shown is that for some very basic equipment and materials, the challenge was that there was just one country that was supplying these things, from face masks to ventilators, you name it. So I think for these products, what is very likely to happen is that because of, I guess, strategic reasons, countries will find a way to bring their production closer to home so that perhaps in the next pandemic, they don't have to rely on global supply chains to access these products. I think that we are not encouraging protectionism. We know that the losses that can come from protectionism, we've seen that in the Great Depression, countries looking inwards and basically closing on foreign production. Let me just say that there was an interesting quote in I think the Financial Times a few weeks back. To basically build a car, you need 2,400 parts. But one part can actually stop you from doing that, right? So it's very difficult to think that a country will be able to integrate all this in just one place.
Okay.
So we will still be depending on our neighbors.
Okay.
For some
but let me ask Mr. Oteng Gyasi, you are surely former AGI president, big producing guy, cables and all of this. You have to agree with me that COVID has taught us that our local productive capacity we've taken for granted for too long, and we have to beef up certain sectors. Mr. Oteng Gyasi.
We need to be strategic about where we first develop capacity. It is a no-brainer that every country should strive to be self-sufficient in food. In your pharmaceuticals, at least your major diseases like malaria, there's no reason why if India refuses to send you the active ingredient for chloroquine, you cannot produce your malaria medication. Your clothing, and of course, your construction, shelter, these are basics which every country should try and achieve a large amount of self-sufficiency in. If even you don't do it 100%, at least you should be, 60, 70% self-sufficient in these basic industries that you need for your own survival as a country.
Okay.
When you go into manufacturing other things, the cars you are talking about, the aeroplanes, the motorcycles, whatever it is. For those areas, you can choose a certain amount of self-sufficiency, but complemented with something which somebody else can give you in exchange for something. You cannot be a global player if you have nothing in which you are so competitive that other people will come to you for. And that is where strategy, industrial policy, and implementation comes in.
Okay, so you've mentioned food, you've mentioned pharmaceuticals. So those are two areas that we should prioritize in terms of production. Is that correct?
Shelter and clothing.
Shelter and clothing.
Yes.
Okay, let me come to Alhassan. As a bank and those who have the money, does it make sense to support manufacturing of food, clothing, shelter, and medicine? It seems to be Tony's top four. Is there appetite on the financing side for this type of production?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think, we have to go back and revisit all the old economic terminology that Africa didn't participate in defining, and we have to have a trade-off between resilience and efficiency. So most of the developed economies, the Asian tigers, took a huge jump, 30, 40 years ago, and built resilient economies based on local demand. And out of that became efficient and then played on the international market through efficiency. Africa never really took off. So if we go on the route of efficiency, then the only efficient thing is because the natural resources are here, they'll come and take it. And then we have that, dependency that we always mourn about. So I think the point Tony was making is, and it's not protectionism if we just say that we will, Ghana should be able to feed itself. And if we actually put the curtains down and put the right investments in with right policy support, over 3 farming circles, Ghana should be able to eat largely what we produce. Pharmaceuticals, we've got a very good relationship with 3 or 4 of the top pharmaceutical firms here, who can literally give us, to a very large extent, most of the medication we would need for most of our recurring diseases. So yeah, pharmaceuticals, agri. In fact, the other thing we are living out is ICT, because with working from home, and COVID is going to change the way we work. So what has to be commonplace now is data availability. It shouldn't be because we're in Bolga, you don't have data to work. So what we should be looking to do at a national level is to provide that kind of facility, across the country. Wherever you are, you have strong internet to work from home, to trade with people in Ghana, to trade with people outside of Ghana. So those are the basic things you have to begin to look at, and have the domestic skills, and especially with COVID, who stepped up to respond? The face mask producers, the hand washing people. These are all technical people who really we didn't take seriously. But in our need, they were the ones that stepped up to produce all the face masks and all the PPEs and all the hand washing, even immediately starting to put sanitizers together. So we have the capacity. And I think Albert and co can help us, help Africa join the table to define some of these global economic terms that they use to stagnate us for so long. Everything we try to break out, is protectionism. We have to have a trade-off between resilience and efficiency. Sufficient time for resilience builds efficiency, and then you can become globally competitive. I'm sure my friend, the doctor in economics, can help. But to your point, I think the banks are very ready to finance all the sectors that we have. We can build domestic resilience and over time efficiency, but the market must be supported by policy to ensure that there's decent return for those who would venture into those areas. But if we do it half-hearted, and then suddenly you're putting money into pharmaceuticals, but we are allowing imports. You're putting money into agriculture, we're allowing imports from areas that have over years, through resilience, built efficiency. There's no way these new startups in Ghana, in Africa, who are trying to give us domestic dependency, there's no way they can compete.
Okay.
So we got to be very brave around how we define this economic term, and we should be at the table to participate in the definition of those economic terms that have been used to put us down for too long.
Dr. Twumasi-Baffour, does a determination to produce our own food, our own clothing, our own shelter, and our own medicine agree with the theory you teach your students in international economics, comparative advantage, and all those nice things, industrial economics? Will we be breaching your theories, or will they fit into your theories?
Indeed, it fits in the theory somehow, not holistically, because we would want to concentrate on goods that we have comparative advantage in. But I believe that COVID has given us the opportunity to look within and see what we can do and harness domestically. But I will not be drawn to highly import substitution policies. Why is that? Because it's also got its own issues. And to be honest, I don't think that we have the infrastructure as we speak to be able to do that. This calls for a very important topic to be discussed. So, for example, as we face this grim prospect, what is Africa doing as a whole? What is a continental free trade agreement doing? We are looking at production of food, production of medicines and clothing and all that. But in all this, we know that manufacturing goes with economies of scale. What is the market size for Ghana? And here we need to look at the effective demand for Ghana. So when you look at the data, you see that, for example, Africa imports over 50% of its food, especially when it comes to beverages. So some of the light manufacturers, yes, we can look within, but I believe that we need to be serious. This is a clarion call for all leaders, especially I would be drawn towards African regional integration and all those policies. I know that the AFTA was supposed to start in June, but because of the COVID, it's been postponed to, I think, in January 2021. But we need to be serious to look within, tap into potential and take advantage of the continent, because we know that we are a very populous continent, and as income levels rise on the continent, it means that we begin to get the market power and take advantage of it. But as it stands, I don't think that we have the required infrastructure to look within. Yeah.
Okay, Dr. Touna-Mama, let me be
Can I make a brief intervention, Bernard? I'm sorry. Can I make a brief intervention?
Go ahead.
Doc's comparative advantage compels me to make a brief intervention. And it is that, comparative advantage is also dynamic and can also come from practice. So if we keep saying that we should look at those in which we have comparative advantage, then we will find out that we won't try anything new. And we'll be stuck with cocoa and shea butter, except that whilst we are doing cocoa and shea butter, people will find synthetic substitutes for that and even take that comparative advantage away. So I think that what, as a country talking from end, is that if you start, you will find that over time, your ability to do whatever it is improves and you get that comparative advantage. And that is what leads to what we call competitive advantage, really. And also, of course, along with your research and all. But the important thing is to decide that I need this, I need malaria medication, and even more critical, develop the entire value chain. So it's not enough to be pressing tablets from somebody's active ingredients. You need to develop the whole value chain. That is the first step towards achieving that comparative advantage. And then the experience you get will also help you to become even more competitive. And then you also need to take into account the fact that many countries, after they have achieved that comparative advantage, they now have modes of pricing, which leads to really dumping things on you so that you can never achieve anything.
Okay.
I keep saying that for a country like Ghana, there is nothing you can start producing here today, which somebody out there will not be prepared to give to you at a cheaper price than you can start making here. So if you go by that argument, we will never start with anything. But then, as we have seen, to our own shock in this pandemic, that is not the way to go.
Thank you. Let me come to Dr. Touna-Mama. Your debt analysis is very depressing, so I don't want to even show it anymore. It's really telling us that a lot of countries are in risk of high debt distress. I have a two-in-one question for you. Shouldn't the IMF be encouraging Western countries and China to cancel our debts totally because we all are at the ground zero? Number two, things like your deficit. The German finance minister said somebody should talk to him about deficits. You guys make a lot of comments about deficit. Shouldn't we throw those things out of the window and just save these economies by dragging them out of the ocean? And then when we are at normal sea level, we can start talking about deficits.
I mean, this is the whole challenge, right? This is the whole challenge. By some estimates, our economies will need to spend around 115 billion US dollars for health and social support in 2020, just as a result of this pandemic. And multilateral institutions like us, but also some bilateral creditors to the G20 initiative that China is part of, have been able to supply some emergency funding, but also some debt suspension, right? But the challenge for a lot of our countries is that at the moment they are spending more in servicing their external debt than what they are putting into the health sector. right? So you want to be able to create enough space. Debt cancellation obviously could be one of the options, but it's unclear that we'll get there. I think at the minimum, what has been pushed for is to have, suspension of debt services from, let's say now, to the next 6 months or 2 years. Some people are also saying 2 years. The challenge at the moment is that for private creditors, it's a bit more complicated than that to just, reprofile the debt. And you have a lot of debtors that are approaching you at the same time. So how do you go about coordinating as a group of private creditors so that you can also chip in and help these countries? So that's the first thing. So in terms of taking account of the deficit, I think that we've been extremely aggressive as an institution to say really the priority here is to do whatever it takes, provide that you can generate the financing to do it. In essence, what we are actually saying is that, for now, let's set aside, the deficit and just do what is needed to save lives and safeguard livelihoods. So that has been our approach as an institution.
And that brings me to the stimulus package. Let me come to Alhassan on that. Every country is talking about a stimulus package. What is your recommendation as to how it should be administered and which sectors need it? Because we keep hearing there's a stimulus package coming. Should they leave it to the banks who understand these things better to manage? Should it be a government agency? And which sectors do you think are priority for such a stimulus package, Alhassan?
I think, first of all, we have to talk about the source of the stimulus financing. And globally, we found out that the source of the stimulus financing is coming from the sovereign, the nation. Now, certainly, your first line is the areas of vulnerability. COVID has just thrown millions of informal sector workers off the street. And literally, they haven't even got 2 weeks of savings. So these guys would literally have nothing to feed on, and they have families. So we have to have, unfortunately in Ghana, we don't have the database, but we have to have a database that would enable us to reach these people and support them over the critical period to the time when they can get back onto the street or in some kind of job. Number two is safeguard firms that are currently tooled up to work. However, their current labor, and other costs that with no revenue, they don't have the savings to be able to sustain. So some kind of stimulus into these firms to keep workers engaged until they can return to good times and produce is extremely important. Of course, stimulus must also prepare us for post-COVID. So three main areas. The first one is the areas of vulnerability where and livelihoods of masses of our informal sector people have been disrupted and they have no income. They have to live. We can't watch them, COVID doesn't kill them, hunger will kill them. So we have to have a way of stimulus reaching them. We have to keep certain firms who otherwise would just close shop because they haven't got any revenue. They are employing 100 people or 200 people there, 20 and their companies like that. We need to be able to understand what their annual plan was, provide them some support to keep workers in. When they return to good ways, they can repay or give them time to repay. And then certainly also make sure that our health infrastructure, particularly primary health. Now we understand that first, wealth starts with the health of the community, not your ability to fly out for a surgery. It's community health. So what are we going to do to put money, to ensure that we are healthy communities before we are healthy individuals and then healthy.
I have 2 minutes to share between Dr. Baffour and Tony. So, Dr. Priscilla Twumasi-Baffour, what's the most important thing the Ghana government must think about post-COVID recovery? And you have a minute to answer that. Thank you.
I think that government needs to think critically at ways of trying to insulate the economy from commodity dependence. And here, within the pandemic, when we talk about stimulus packages that we need to look at, we should be able to support companies, for example, payroll, support to help them maintain the workforce that they have, even though they may be facing problems with demand. Payment of arrears to companies if they are owed by government would come in handy. And then supply of low-cost credits, because when Mr. Andani was talking that the financial sector is ready to support manufacturing, I was asking at what price to myself. So it is important that we get resources, finance to manufacturing sector and all other sectors of the economy, indeed, to be able to gather get the activities together and get the economy running again.
And Ms. Oteng, you have the final word. Give me your final comment for all of us in this very troubling COVID times. What should we all do so we don't lose hope and die?
I'm excited to hear that our finance minister is leading a team of African finance ministers to try and fashion an Africa-wide approach to this thing. I say that because I think this is a chance for us to look at the whole global financial architecture. How come America can give 3 trillion worth of stimulus packages and we can only give 3 billion cedis? And if it works out per capita, I mean, we are giving, $10 per person, and America can give $6,000 per person. These are fundamental questions of the global financial architecture that we need to look at. And we can only do that Africa-wide. So that's why I'm excited that our finance minister is leading an African finance minister's effort at this. We don't have enough time. One day we should sit down and talk about that in detail.
Thank you very much. Let me wrap up with a couple of quick comments. Bernard, good evening to your panelists. Any stimulus package aimed at driving demand should be carefully implemented so we can derive its full benefit. Driving local demand should be the way. Charles from Sogakope. I want to ask Mr. Andani that what will happen to those who owed the banks, especially Stanbic? Will such people be given time to repay in their time due to COVID? I'm not sure he has time to answer this. And then Musa Nari from Kumasi says, if you look at COVID-19, that is clearly a polynomial curve, and it means we are nowhere near decline. And so we would definitely record higher numbers. Good evening. Musa, I wanted good news and hope, not a grim prognosis. So let me say thank you very much, my guest, Alhassan Andani, who's the MD or CEO of Stanbic Ghana, President of Ghana Bankers Association. I'll come for your hat. I like it very much. Dr. Albert Touna-Mama is the country rep for IMF. Thank you, Doc, for being on the program. Thank you for your beautiful slides. Dr. Priscilla Twumasi-Baffour, the panel of Economics, University of Ghana, my alma mater. Thank you for all the good work you do. And lawyer, industrialist, economist, Tony Oteng, Gyasi, as ever, a pleasure having you on the show. Thank you very much indeed. And
Thank
so,
you very much.
Yes,
Thank
and
you.
so we hope
Yes.
you've learned a thing or two tonight listening to these 4 amazing minds. Keep tuned to 97.3 CTFM on radio and CTTV for a lot of great programs. My name is Bernard Avle. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.